The twins were crying before Martha even reached the porch steps, their wails cutting through the October wind like broken glass. Cole Garrison dropped his hammer mid-swing, watching his brother's wife stumble toward him, with a baby clutched in each arm, her mare limping behind her with a leg that wouldn't bear weight. "Where is he?" The words came out harder than he meant, but Martha's hollow eyes told him everything before her cracked lips could form an answer. "Gone?" She swayed, and Cole lunged forward to catch her before she collapsed. The babies, he'd never seen them before, hadn't even known they existed until right now, kept screaming. 3 days now, fever took him fast. Cole's hands shook as he helped her inside his cabin, the same cabin where James had grown up, where they'd shared boyhood secrets and dreams of cattle ranches that stretched to the horizon. Now James was dead at 26, and his widow had ridden 40 miles with newborn twins and a dying horse to reach the only family she had left. "I got nowhere else," Martha whispered, settling into the chair by his cold fireplace. "No money, no people, just heard James mention his baby brother lived out here, working that old Garrison place." Baby brother. Cole winced. At 24, he'd never been called anything but. Never married, never courted seriously, never even kissed a woman properly. He could rope cattle and mend fence posts, could shoot straight and work from dawn to dusk without complaint. But babies? The tiny red faces peering out from Martha's torn shawl might as well have been wild coyotes for all he knew about caring for them. "The horse won't make it," he said, glancing through the window at the mare standing three-legged in his yard. "I know." Martha's voice carried the weight of too many losses. "Nothing's made it lately." Cole stoked the fire, his mind racing. Winter was coming, He could smell it in the air, see it in the way the aspens had already dropped their leaves. He had enough supplies for one man to make it through the cold months, maybe enough for two if they were careful. But 2 babies, a grieving woman, and now a useless horse that would need to be put down before dark. The nearest town was 15 miles south, and the widow Henderson's place was 12 miles east. Both might as well have been on the moon. One of the twins had stopped crying, but the other kept wailing, and the sound made something twist in Cole's chest. Part terror, part something else he couldn't name. Martha tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold her. "I can work," she said, desperation bleeding through every word. "I can cook, clean, help with the cattle. I just need—" "Sit." Cole's voice was gentler now. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of animals caught in traps. "You need rest, and these babies need feeding. I can't pay you nothing. Didn't ask you to." But even as he said it, Cole felt the weight of what he was taking on. His supplies would stretch thin. The cabin had only one room and his narrow bed. Martha would need privacy for nursing, and the babies would need warmth through the brutal months ahead. Then there was the matter of what people would say. A bachelor living alone with his brother's widow. In a territory where reputation mattered more than water rights, that kind of talk could destroy a man. Martha must have seen the calculation in his eyes. "I'll move on come spring," she said quickly. "Soon as the road's clear and I can figure something out. There's got to be work somewhere. Maybe—" "Stop!" Cole knelt by the fireplace, building up the flames. "James was my blood. That makes these babies mine to protect too." The words surprised him as much as they did her. He'd never thought of himself as a protector of anything more complicated than cattle, but looking at those tiny faces, he felt something shift inside his chest, like tectonic plates finding new ground. "People will talk," Martha warned. "People always talk. They'll say things about us, about what it means, you taking in your brother's widow." Cole had heard the stories, men who took in their brothers' wives, the whispered assumptions, the knowing looks. In some places, it was expected. In others, it was scandal. But looking at Martha's haunted face and the babies who carried his brother's eyes, Cole found he didn't much care what people said. Let them talk. Outside, hoofbeats echoed across the valley, slow, deliberate, moving toward his cabin. Cole's stomach dropped. News traveled fast in sparse country, and Martha's arrival wouldn't have gone unnoticed. Someone had seen her ride in, seen the state she was in, and now they were coming to see what Cole Garrison intended to do about his unexpected family. The horses stopped just outside his door, and Cole heard the creak of leather saddles and the low murmur of men's voices. Through the window, he counted 3 riders, their faces shadowed by hat brims, but their posture unmistakably official. The knock came firm and measured, the sound of authority that didn't expect to be kept waiting. Cole opened the door to find Sheriff Morrison flanked by two men he recognized, Doc Wheeler and Henry Blackwood, the territory's self-appointed moral compass and the man who controlled most of the credit at the general store. Cole, Morrison touched his hat brim, but his eyes moved past him to where Martha sat with the babies. Heard you had some visitors. I sister-in-law. Her husband died. Cole kept his voice steady, though his pulse hammered against his collar. So we heard. Blackwood stepped forward, his thin face sharp with disapproval. Question is what you plan to do about it. Feed her, give her shelter, same as I'd do for any family. Family! Doc Wheeler spat tobacco juice into the dirt. That what we're calling it? The insult hit Cole like a physical blow, but he held his ground. Behind him, he heard Martha's sharp intake of breath, knew she was listening to every word. My brother's widow and his children, Cole said carefully. Nothing more, nothing less. Brother has been dead 3 days, Morrison said. Woman rides 40 miles to reach you instead of staying in town where there's proper help. Makes a man wonder about the timing. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a grass fire. Cole's hands clenched into fists, but he forced them to remain at his sides. Violence wouldn't help Martha or the babies, no matter how much he wanted to plant his knuckles in Morrison's knowing smirk. She had nowhere else to go. Course she didn't, Blackwood's voice dripped false sympathy. Poor thing, all alone with 2 babies and winter coming. Mighty convenient, finding herself a provider so quick. You're walking a thin line, Cole warned. Am I? Blackwood smiled. See, thing is, Cole, we got responsibilities in this territory. Can't have unmarried men taking in women, especially not in circumstances like these. People start wondering about the propriety of it all. Doc Wheeler nodded. Territory's got standards to maintain, Christian values and such. Through the window, Cole saw more riders approaching, a handful of townspeople drawn by curiosity or summoned by design. Word was spreading like wildfire, and he realized this wasn't a casual visit. This was a reckoning, carefully orchestrated to force his hand. So, here's what's going to happen, Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of law. Women and babies can come to town. We'll find proper arrangements. Church will see they're cared for. And me? You go back to your cattle and your solitude, and we all pretend this unfortunate situation never happened. Cole's throat went dry. He could see the trap closing, refuse, and they'd paint him as immoral, maybe even dangerous. Except, and Martha would disappear into the charity system, her babies raised by strangers while she worked as a servant to pay for their keep. Behind him, Martha stood with effort, one baby in her arms while the other lay quiet on the chair. It's all right, Cole, she said softly. Maybe they're right. Maybe it's better if... No. The word came out stronger than he felt. You're staying. Cole. Martha's voice carried warning, but also something that might have been hope. He turned to face her fully, seeing for the first time not just his brother's widow, but the woman herself. Young, frightened, but with steel in her spine that reminded him of their mother. The baby in her arms had stopped fussing and was staring at him with dark eyes that were pure James. James made me promise, Cole said, the lie coming easier than he expected. Last time I saw him, he made me swear that if anything happened, I'd look after you and the children. It wasn't true. He hadn't seen James in 2 years, hadn't even known about the marriage or the babies. But something in Martha's face told him she understood the necessity of the fiction. He did? Her voice was barely a whisper. Said you were the finest woman he'd ever known. Said these babies would need family, not charity. Cole looked past her to the men on his porch. Said a garrison's word was his bond. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. The garrison name still carried weight in the territory. Their father had been one of the original settlers, had died defending the town from raiders. Even Blackwood wouldn't openly challenge a deathbed promise. That's all well and good, Doc Wheeler said, but promises don't change impropriety. Then I'll marry her. The words hung in the air like a gunshot echo. Cole felt Martha's sharp intake of breath, saw the shock in the men's faces, felt his own heart hammering against his ribs. He hadn't planned to say it, hadn't even thought it until the words were out. But now they were spoken, and there was no taking them back. Today? Morrison's eyebrows rose. Soon as you can arrange it, Cole's voice steadied. Doc Wheeler can perform the ceremony. Blackwood can witness it. Make it all proper and Christian. Martha stared at him, her face pale, but her eyes bright with something that might have been relief or terror or both. The ceremony took place 3 days later in Cole's cabin, with Martha wearing her one good dress and holding both babies while Doc Wheeler read from a prayer book he'd brought from town. The words felt strange in Cole's mouth, promises he'd never expected to make to a woman he barely knew. But when Martha whispered, "I do," with tears in her eyes, something settled in his chest like a key finding its lock. Sheriff Morrison and Henry Blackwood served as witnesses, their faces carefully neutral now that propriety had been restored. The other townspeople who'd gathered to watch dispersed afterward, their hunger for scandal temporarily satisfied by the unexpected resolution. That first winter was harder than any Cole had known. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, Martha named them, woke throughout the night with needs he couldn't understand, and appetites that seemed endless. Martha worked despite her exhaustion, cooking meals that stretched their supplies and mending clothes until her fingers bled. Cole learned to change diapers and rock crying babies, discovered that his calloused hands could be gentle when small lives depended on them. They slept apart at first, Martha in the bed with the babies, while Cole made do with blankets by the fire. But gradually, as the months passed and the arrangement became less strange, they began to share the quiet evening hours. Martha mending, while Cole whittled toys for the babies, both of them talking about James, about the life he'd wanted, about the future that stretched uncertain before them. The first time Martha laughed, really laughed, not the polite sound she made for company, was when Samuel grabbed Cole's nose and wouldn't let go. The sound filled the cabin like sunlight, and Cole realized he'd been holding his breath for months, waiting for her to find shore again. Spring brought new challenges and small victories. Martha's strength returned, and with it came a confidence Cole hadn't seen before. She took over the garden, expanded it beyond anything he'd managed alone. The babies grew sturdy and bright, Samuel quiet and watchful like his uncle, Sarah bold and demanding like her father had been. By summer, when Martha laughed easily and the babies knew Cole's voice as well as their mother's, the marriage that had begun as necessity started to feel like something chosen. They never spoke of love. That word belonged to James and always would. But what grew between them was steady and real, built on shared work and mutual respect and the fierce protectiveness they both felt for the children. Years later, when Samuel and Sarah were old enough to ask about their father, Martha would tell them about James's dreams and his laughter, about the love he'd had for them, even though he'd never gotten to hold them. And Cole would add his own memories, the good ones, painting a picture of a brother who'd been larger than life and twice as stubborn. But on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the fire burned low, Martha and Cole would sit together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead through their window. They'd built something unexpected from loss and necessity, not the passionate romance of storybooks, but something perhaps more valuable, a partnership that had weathered scandal and hardship to become unshakable. The last horse of autumn had long since been put down, but they had acquired others. The cabin had been expanded. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, and the twins grew strong in the mountain air, surrounded by the love of two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of tragedy and made something beautiful from the wreckage.